Part 13. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 121. Chapter 121. Where are you going? I may not stay here for a long time. This is what Tang Yu said to Lin 11 when he was packing things in the ward. Lin 11's heart was shaken violently, her hands to pack things stopped, and even the raised corners of her mouth stopped raising. She put down what she was holding, straightened up, looked at Tang Yu seriously and asked, "Where are you going?" Tang Yu suddenly laughed when he saw her serious look, "Looking at your nervous look, I mean I can't always stay at your house. What I mean is that I might use my previous savings to buy a smaller house." Enough. Lin 11 sighed secretly in her heart. She looked at Tang Yu with a smile, "Look at what you are capable of. I can't accommodate you in my house. Then Lao Zhang will come back sooner or later, right? He is still so busy. When he comes back, we can't have the whole family stay at your house. We may go back to the previous house, or he may have bought a new house, but I want to buy a smaller one so that my family can live comfortably. The relationship is great. When the time comes, our family will also move to a smaller house and we will live together," Lin 11 said, pretending to be relaxed. Tang Yu couldn't help but shook his head and smiled, but in his heart he smiled bitterly and asked, "When are you going to tell me the truth? Let's go back and have hot pot tonight? How about we buy ingredients later?" Lin 11 suggested. Tang Yu nodded in agreement. On the other side, Zhongwanan School. Suddenly, I received a notice that Zhongwanan's Chinese teacher went home on vacation for some reason, and Zhongwanan also welcomed a new Chinese teacher. Everyone was not very interested in the Chinese class today because they didn't know what the new teacher would be like, or whether he would be strict or not. It would be better if he was not strict. After all, although the previous teacher was kind to them, he was a bit strict. Just when everyone was lying on the table in disinterest, the sound of ta-da-da got closer and closer, and the whole class raised their heads and looked at the door together with a tacit understanding. After a while, a woman wearing high heels came in. Looking up, the woman was wearing a dress, with long hair draped over her shoulders. She was also quite beautiful. She looked quiet and somewhat slim, as if she had the appearance of a big man. The look of a lady. At first glance, it is clear that he is knowledgeable and sensible. The whole class opened their mouths in surprise, thinking that this teacher was really good looking. The teacher walked up to the podium with dignified steps, put down the textbook gently, and introduced, "Hello everyone, I am your new Chinese teacher. My surname is Wang. You can call me Teacher Wang. From now on, the Chinese class will be I spent time with you, hope you all enjoy it." After she finished introducing her classmates, the students replied with a long pronunciation of good. The teacher raised his eyebrows calmly, thinking that the children in this class seemed pretty good, they looked well behaved and sensible. She took a piece of chalk, broke it a little, then turned around and wrote today's topic on the blackboard. "Today we are going to learn a new lesson. I hope everyone will listen carefully, okay?" The teacher kept a smile on his face, so that the children could not see any harshness, so they all cheered up and stared at the blackboard attentively. The children seemed to like Teacher Wang's class very much after the first class, and the teacher didn't find too many distracted children. Teacher Wang looked at the children with a smile and said, "I had a great time getting along with everyone in this class. I hope it can be like this again in the next class." The children answered seriously, and then saw the teacher take out something and walk off the podium. End of this chapter. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 122. Chapter 122. It seems that the lower limbs are no longer there. This is a reward for students who answered questions in class. The teacher was not well prepared, so I hope everyone will not dislike it. As Teacher Wang spoke, he tore off small red flowers one after another and pasted them on the foreheads of the children who had answered the questions. Among them is Zhongwanan. Zhang Wanan had a good impression of this teacher. When the teacher applied it to her, she showed her neat little white teeth and smiled, "Thank you, Teacher Wang." Teacher Wang also smiled and touched her head, "Keep up the good work." Zhang Wanan used to dislike Chinese classes, but at this moment she suddenly felt that Chinese classes were really good, and she felt that she should listen to them carefully. Since Tang Yu woke up and Lin 11 often stayed with Tang Yu, she rarely picked up the two children. She had already given the matter to the driver with confidence. Xiao Jojo Zhang Wanan ran out and shouted. Lu Zizhu's face felt hot when he felt the eyes directed at him. But how could Zhang Wanan care about this? She rushed straight towards Lu Zizhu and ran into his arms. "What makes you so happy?" Lu Zizhu asked. One look at Zhang Wanan's silly and happy look and knew that something good must have happened. "Don't tell me that your table mate treated you to delicious food," Lu Zizhu said and carried her into the car. "Please, but that's not why I'm happy." Zhang Wanan hugged Lu Zizhu's neck tightly and refused to let go, so out of desperation, Lu Zizhu put her on his lap. The two of them were face to face. Zhang Wanan could only smile like this. Lu Zizhu seemed to be infected too and couldn't help but smile. "Why would you be happy if your table mate treated you to something delicious?" Lu Zizhu pinched her face and asked. Zhang Wanan smiled mysteriously and held up her bangs, pointed at her forehead and said, "Look. Little red flower? Isn't this only found in kindergartens?" Lu Zizhu said with some disdain. Zhang Wanan put down her bangs and made a cut sound, curled her lips and pretended to be unhappy and said, "What do you know? This is given to me by the new teacher Wang, because I performed well." Zhang Wanan said a bit proud. Lu Zizhu raised his eyebrows. "Has the teacher changed?" "Of course, the new teacher is a bit good-looking, tall and thin." Zhang Wanan continued to praise the new teacher. "Is it good enough to be eaten? Only good teaching quality is good," Lu Zizhu said stubbornly. "Okay, look," Zhang Wanan said and picked up her bangs again. Lu Zizhu lowered his head and chuckled and asked, "You mean you who usually don't like Chinese classes have been rewarded?" "Yes, this means that the teacher teaches well and I like it." "That's because it's new to you, the new teacher." Zhang Wanan felt that she could not continue speaking. "If you don't believe me, just wait and see," Lu Zizhu said seriously, not knowing where he got the confidence. Zhang Wanan sat on his lap and leaned into his arms, then hugged his neck and said, "It's time to go to sleep." "Can't say that he." Zhang Wanan said she was sleeping, but she didn't see her sleeping until she got home, so she just sat on Lu Zizhu's lap all the way. Zhang Wanan jumped out of the car nimbly, but Lu Zizhu felt a little uncomfortable after being sat all the way. This time was different from the last time Zhang Wanan slept on his lap. That time only one leg was numb, but this time both legs were numb. Numb. "It's like my lower limbs are no longer there, I can't feel them anymore." Zhang Wanan jumped out of the car and opened the car door to look in. Her big eyes looked at Lu Zizhu a few times and asked, "What's wrong with you, Xiao Jojo?" End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 123. Chapter 123. A lollipop can solve the problem. Lu Zizhu waved his hand to indicate that he was fine. Zhang Wanan continued to hold the car door open and asked, "Then why don't you get out of the car? Do you want to sleep in the car?" Lu Zizhu. It wasn't because of this culprit that he couldn't get out of the car for a while, but now this little guy doesn't feel any guilt at all. Lu Zizhu thought to himself. Lu Zizhu gritted his teeth and got out of the car. He put his arm around Zhang Wanan's shoulders and said, "It's time for you to lose weight." Zhang Wanan. Zhang Wanan felt speechless and confused. He didn't know why he was suddenly disliked. Zhang Baihui said that only fleshy girls are good, Zhang Wanan said nonchalantly. Jiang Baihui. He, this guy is quite good at talking. Loses who thought to himself. He lied to you, he doesn't like fleshy girls, loses who said ruthlessly. Ah. How do you know? Zhang Wanan raised her head and looked at him. Loses who opened his mouth but said nothing. He didn't know how he knew it. How could he explain this? Zhang Wanan originally wanted to continue asking, but Lin 11 and Tang Yu happened to see them entering the door and called them over. Children, would you like us to have hot pot tonight? Lin 11 asked. Okay, I like hot pot, Zhang Wanan shouted excitedly. But Loses who just nodded lightly, and then when he looked at Zhang Wanan, he felt that this guy really had no future. If someone wants to steal her, a lollipop can probably solve the problem. Go put down your skull bag and wash your hands and we'll start cooking, Tang Yu said with a smile. Hey, can you help me carry the skull bag? Zhang Wanan stood in front of Loses who holding up the skull bag. No, Loses who rejected her bluntly. Xiao Jojo, can you help me get it up? It's so tiring to walk, and it's even more tiring to have to carry a big skull bag. You don't want to see me walking bent over, right? Zhang Wanan said to Loses who, both miserable and cute. You can take a look, Loses who said. Then it would be very embarrassing for me to bend down and walk beside you. Don't you want to be embarrassed, Xiao Jojo? Zhang Wanan handed the skull bag to him again and winked. Loses who sighed and said helplessly, lazy pig, you have always been embarrassed. Xiao Jojo. Zhang Wanan pinched her waist with one hand and pretended to be angry. Loses whose attack on Zhang Wanan was finally defeated. He resignedly took her skull bag and went upstairs. Thank you, Xiao Jojo, Zhang Wanan said obediently. Don't call me Xiaozos who, Loses who turned to warn her. Okay, Xiaozos who. Zhang Wanan happily ran to the restaurant after someone helped deliver her skull bag. Hey, moms, little Anan is here, Zhang Wanan ran towards them. Did you bully your brother? Tang Yu touched her head. Zhang Wanan grabbed her hand and gave it a gentle sip, saying, I'm not bullying my brother, the main thing is that my brother loves me. Lin 11 and Tang Yu couldn't help laughing when they heard her words. They all sat down, and while waiting for Loses who, Zhang Wanan didn't forget to lift up her bangs to show off the little red flower she got. I'm in Chinese class now, Zhang Wanan said, pointing to her forehead. That means your new teacher is very good at teaching, Tang Yu said. No, brother said it. We are just listening now because it feels fresh. When Zhang Wanan said this, Loses who happened to come down from upstairs. Lin 11 looked at Loses who, her eyes seemed to be asking him to confirm whether he had said this. But Loses who turned a blind eye to this. He coughed twice and took the seat and said, I'm so hungry. I'm so hungry too. Zhang Wanan clutched her stomach and assisted in time, but she didn't know that she was assisting. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 124. Chapter 124. Life is like a play, it all depends on acting skills. The four of them talked for a while after eating the hot pot happily. Zhang Wanan was simply their pistachio, and every word he said was full of laughter. On the other hand, Loses who didn't know why he was like a pimple and didn't say anything. Only when Zhang Wanan was talking, he looked at Zhang Wanan and grinned stupidly, like an admirer. Lin 11 looked at his silly son and rolled his eyes helplessly. Zhang Wanan was particularly attached to Tang Yu before going to bed at night. She didn't want Tang Yu to leave her room no matter what. She wanted Tang Yu to sleep with her all night. Lin 11 patted Tang Yu on the shoulder, please stay with Anan. Tang Yu nodded and carried Zhang Wanan to his room. Although Zhang Wanan has grown up and should sleep by herself, Tang Yu only slept with her when she was very young. Something happened to her when she grew up, and Tang Yu also wanted to hold the little girl to sleep. One night. Zhang Wanan was very happy that night. She rolled around excitedly on Tang Yu's big bed and refused to sleep. Anan, we have class tomorrow, Can you sleep well? Tang Yu asked patiently. Zhang Wanan smiled and said, listen to mom. She lay down beside Tang Yu and turned over to face Tang Yu. Mom, you are so beautiful, she said. Tang Yu was stunned for a moment. She knew that her current face could not be said to be unattractive. It was just that her complexion was a little yellow due to malnutrition from lying down for a long time. Tang Yu held her tightly in his arms and touched her head, not knowing what to say. How about we wait for Dad to come back together, Zhang Wanan said. Okay, let's wait for Dad to come back, Tang Yu said in a trembling voice, but Zhang Wanan couldn't hear it. The next day, Lin 11 and Tang Yu walked out of the door arm in arm as they sent Zhang Wanan and Lu Zizhu away. Let's go shopping today. I haven't bought clothes for a long time, Lin 11 complained. Tang Yu smiled and nodded. On the other side, Zhang Wanan school. Today's first class is Chinese class. Zhang Wanan has been looking forward to it since she was in the car. She has been telling Lu Zizhu how good the Chinese teacher is. Lu Zizhu didn't get tired of listening to what she said over and over again, he just kept smiling as he listened to her. The little girl is too naive now. Her first impression of someone is good and she will think that the other person is a completely good person, but she has no idea that people nowadays will pretend. After all, life is like a play, it all depends on acting skills. When the school bell rang, everyone was eagerly looking forward to the Chinese teacher, but as a result, the Chinese teacher arrived late after more than 10 minutes of class. However, the students still greeted him enthusiastically. Unexpectedly, Teacher Wang today impatiently gestured for the students to sit down, and then wrote the topic on the blackboard with a pen. Find a classmate to read the text. She frowned and looked at the students under the podium and said, it's up to you, read it. She randomly selected a boy and asked him to read it, but as soon as the boy stood up, she opened the classroom door and went out. The boy who was reading the text looked at the closed classroom door in confusion and paused, thinking of waiting for the teacher to come back before reading again. But after waiting for about 5 minutes, the teacher still hadn't come back. The boy was usually naughty, so he sat down before the teacher came back. 10 minutes later, the teacher came back with her high heels clicking. As soon as she entered the door, she stared at the boy and asked, have you finished reading? Who asked you to sit down? The boy stood up quickly and wanted to explain, but Teacher Wang didn't give him a chance to explain. Read, she shouted loudly. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 125. Chapter 125, Speaking Openly. So the boy had no choice but to continue reading aggrievedly. The students couldn't help but become frightened when they saw Teacher Wang like this today. Fortunately, this class has been delayed a lot, so the get out of class ended not long after. After Teacher Wang walked out, the students took a deep breath. I think this old witch is definitely in a bad mood, the little boy who had just read the text said angrily. Compared to yesterday, there are 2 people. Another boy continued. It's so scary, Zhang Wanan whispered to Zhang Baihui. Zhang Baihui chuckled, you wouldn't think of not learning Chinese again when you see the teacher like this, right? Zhang Wanan shook his head hurriedly, like a rattle, no, how dare I not learn from the teacher who is so cruel? Maybe the teacher is in a bad mood, don't be too afraid, Zhang Baihui comforted him. I think so, Zhang Wanan nodded in agreement. There was another Chinese class in the afternoon, and Teacher Wang still came to class with a bad face. She even said dirty words to her classmates. As a teacher, she should not teach children such words, but she said it herself. And it was said in an extremely unpleasant way. Teacher, are you in a bad mood today? The Chinese class representative stood up and asked nervously. Teacher Wang glared at her and suddenly got angry for no apparent reason, go away and stand there. Do you care whether I'm in a good mood or not? The little girl was so frightened that she burst into tears and then stood in the corner holding the book. She will have the same consequences for talking nonsense in class. Teacher Wang looked around and asked, "Who else has any objections?" There was silence below. Teacher Wang sneered and continued the class with satisfaction. "Okay students, that's it for this class. I hope you will listen carefully in class and don't need to pay too much attention to the teacher." 1 minute before get out of class ended, Teacher Wang suddenly changed into a different person. "The tone is the same as when I first arrived." The students' eyes widened in shock and they didn't know what to do for a moment. They didn't react until the bell rang and Teacher Wang went out. "Just sitting there stupidly, you looked at me and I looked at you." In the end, a few naughty and heartless classmates made a sound first and ran out. Maybe the teacher is really in a bad mood, let's be considerate. The Chinese class representative was a little tired, so he bent back to his seat and lay down. The other side. Probably because they were women and they hadn't been shopping for a long time, Lin 11 and Tang Yu excitedly ransacked various clothing stores. Lin 11 looked at the things in his hands and sighed, "I don't think the rich water should go to other people's fields. Let it go to my family." Luz also owns a shopping mall, which is near the mall where they visited. "Let's go, Mrs. Lu is really getting better and better at doing business," Tang Yu said with a smile. Lin 11 smiled sheepishly and the two went downstairs hand in hand. As soon as he walked to the store owned by Lu, Lin 11 met an acquaintance. "Hi, Mrs. Lu, long time no see." A woman ran over from a distance and greeted her. Lin 11 squinted her eyes to see clearly who came and also greeted her, "Mrs. Yang, long time no see." Then Mrs. Yang came over and greeted Lin 11 with a smile and then looked at Tang Yu next to her. Is this, Mrs. Zhang?" she asked in surprise. Tang Yu nodded politely, "Yes, hello. Are you awake?" "What if? I'm standing in front of you now," Tang Yu said with a smile. This is such a surprise. I heard that Mr. Zhang has passed away. Look how thin you are. Don't be too sad and take care of yourself." Although Mrs. Yang was kind-hearted, some secrets were revealed by her unabashedly. Lin 11 on the side couldn't stop him even if he wanted to. Tang Yu's smile instantly solidified after hearing her words. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 126. Chapter 126. The soul was taken away. Lin 11 on one side held Tang Yu's hand. She looked at Mrs. Yang and said, "Mrs. Yang, we still have something to do. Let's talk about it next time." After saying that, he took Tang Yu and left. She pulled Tang Yu to the safe exit. When she stopped and looked back at Tang Yu, she found that her face was particularly ugly, and the frozen smile on her face became even weirder. Listen to my explanation." Lin 11 anxiously threw the things aside and held her hand, eager to explain. "You don't have to tell me, I've already guessed it, but I didn't expect to hear the truth from other people's mouths." Tang Yu smiled. "That's not the case, Lin 11 wanted to explain, but was interrupted by Tang Yu. "You are afraid that I can't accept it, but my ability to bear it is not as bad as you think. I understand the situation better than anyone at that time. I have been awake for so long and Lao Zhang is still unwilling to come. This is impossible, unless he has already." Tang Yu didn't say anything later, but Lin 11 knew it well. "I'm sorry, we didn't mean to hide it from you," Lin 11 said. "It doesn't matter, I know you are all doing this for my own good. It's good to have someone to say it out, so you can reduce the pressure," Tang Yu said with a wry smile. Lin 11 knew that anything she said at this moment was useless, so she had no choice but to stay with her quietly. "Where is Lao Zhang?" I want to see him, Tang Yu suddenly asked after a long silence. Lao Lu took me there before. I don't remember the way very well. How about waiting for him to take us there when he comes back from his business trip? Tang Yu nodded. Let's keep hiding it from Anan. She is still young, so just pretend that Lao Lu is still there, but working far away, Tang Yu said. After speaking, Tang Yu tiredly held the door and slid down as if his soul had been taken away. Lin 11 nodded. She knew that Tang Yu was not only deceiving Zhang Wanan, but also deceiving himself. In fact, she did not fully accept it, no matter how much mental preparation she made in the days and nights after waking up. It was already very late when they got home. Tang Yu's eyes were red and swollen, and the aunts were startled as soon as they got home. Sister-in-law Wang, please help me pour a glass of water, after Lin 11 ordered. She also used her eyes to signal to sister-in-law Wang not to ask anything. Sister-in-law Wang has been in the Lu family for more than 10 years and is a smart person. She has already guessed what happened, so she nodded slightly and went to pour the water without saying a word. Axie, please close the door for me and go out. I want to be quiet. Tang Yu, who returned to the room, wrapped himself in a quilt and said with empty eyes. Okay. Lin 11 glanced worriedly and backed out. Anan will be back soon, you. I know, I won't let her find out anything. Tang Yu closed his eyes tiredly and interrupted what Lin 11 wanted to say. Of course she knew what Lin 11 was going to say. Lin 11 looked at her worriedly for a few more times before retreating. Teacher Wang is so weird today, just like two people. Zhang Wanan, who was sitting in the car, complained softly. What's wrong? Luzes, who glanced at her expression and asked with concern. It's just a little strange anyway. Zhang Wanan pouted, not happy, and unwilling to say too much. Luzes, who nodded, it remains to be seen. Huh? Zhang Wanan didn't understand. It's okay, I see you are tired. Do you want to sleep? Luzes, who patted his leg and asked. Zhang Wanan glanced at me and said with a smile, don't you think I'm too heavy? Well, I would have forgotten it if you didn't remind me, Luzes, who said, pretending to be surprised. Huh? Zhang Wanan turned to look out the window angrily. Luzes, who glanced at her and chuckled helplessly, then brought the little girl over and said softly, I don't dislike you, just lie down. Zhang Wanan was instantly happy when he heard this and lay down without saying a word. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 127. Chapter 127. Can you be a fashion designer? As expected, you don't even know how to feel sorry for me, Luzes, who said, pretending to be helpless. Ah, I feel so sorry for Xiao Jojo, Zhang Wanan said cooperatively. Don't call me Xiaozos, who, it's so childish, Luzes, who said with a dark face. I don't know why Zhang Wanan likes this bad title, and I don't know what it sounds like. Zhang Wanan smiled and stopped talking. The car drove smoothly on the road, and Zhang Wanan also fell asleep peacefully. Luzes, who suddenly discovered that Zhang Wanan seemed to like sleeping in the car, and he didn't know why. When he arrived at home, Zhang Wanan first looked for Lin 11 and then Tang Yu. Where's Mom? Zhang Wanan asked Lin 11. Ah. Mom is resting upstairs, Lin 11 said. Then I'll go up and see her. After saying that, Zhang Wanan was already jumping upstairs. Anan, Mom is resting. Let's not disturb her. Dinner will be here soon. She is a little tired when we go shopping today. Lin 11 stopped her in a hurry. I'm just taking a look outside, I won't disturb you. Then, well, don't disturb me, just take a look at the door, Lin 11 said. Zhang Wanan nodded and slowed down his steps obediently. She meant what she said. She just opened the door, peeked through the crack of the door, and then left. I feel relieved when I see my mother in the room, Zhang Wanan said with a smile. She said it lightly, but Lin 11 felt a little sad. She was so afraid that her mother would leave. Mom has bought you several new clothes. Can you take them to see them? Lin 11 asked while holding her hand and walking. Okay. Every girl has a love for beauty, and Jongwon is no exception. She especially likes new clothes and also likes to match her own clothes. Every time she matches them, she makes people's eyes shine, and she can match them better than an adult. Jongwon still matched the new clothes he bought one by one this time, showing Lin 11 each piece of matching, and even used Lin 11's clothes to match Lin 11. Lin 11 saw her enthusiasm for matching clothes and praised her, saying that she could become a fashion designer in the future and be famous. Jongwon was still young and didn't know what was famous or not, but she just felt that Lin 11 would be happy if she praised her. Jongwon put together a suit herself, and then said she was going to show it to Luzes Who. Lin 11 would stop her and just asked her to go quickly. She must make her silly son think that Jongwon is good looking and good at matching things, just to make his eyes light up. So Jongwon walked happily to Luzes Who's room. "Xiao Jojo, here I come." She knocked on the door and opened a gap and said, "Come on, little An." And Luzes Who tried to dissuade her many times to no avail, so he could only imitate her call. Actually, it sounds pretty good, he thinks. Jongwon walked in front of him and turned around happily. "Look at my little boat." Luzes Who was busy doing his homework. He just glanced at her and praised her seriously. Well, she did a good job. She didn't ask him to comment on how well she spins in circles. But what exactly did she want him to see? She didn't say anything, she just turned around again. Luzes Who glanced at her again and kindly reminded her, "You will get dizzy if you spin for a long time." Jongwon suddenly felt that this little Jojo was really stupid. How could he be so smart? "I want you to see if my clothes look good," Jongwon finally couldn't help but burst out. Luzes Who finally turned around and looked at her seriously. "Bought a new one? It looks pretty good." "Gone, goodbye." Jongwon closed the door angrily and went out. "You didn't even praise her for her beauty? I don't know what this little Jojo is thinking." Jongwon thought angrily. Today's update: I feel sick and have a bad headache. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 128. Chapter 128. I believe in you. Lin 11 saw Jongwon going downstairs angrily. She knew without even thinking that her stupid son's IQ had dropped again at the critical moment. "Anan, come here and eat the fruit, don't worry about that fool," Lin 11 called her. Jongwon angrily walked over and sat on the sofa, took the apple Lin 11 handed her and took a bite. She chewed the apple as hard as she could, as if what she had in her mouth was not an apple but Luzes Who. Lin 11 only found it funny when she saw it. She shook her head helplessly and said with a smile, "Eat more, Anan. Reduce your anger." The doorbell rang just before dinner in the evening. Lin 11 looked at the time and thought that no one would come at this time. Auntie was serving food in the kitchen and Lin 11 went to open the door. When he opened the door, he found that the person at the door was none other than Lu Lin, who had just returned from a long journey. Looking through the light in the room, he saw that the person in front of him looked a little tired. Lin 11 felt a little distressed and a little excited. "Why are you back today? Aren't you going to come back in another 3 days? Lin 11 took Lu Lin's bag with some excitement. Lu Lin hugged Lin 11 first and then spoke, "I heard you say that. I'm worried about that matter. I've already taken care of the more important things over there. I can just take care of the other things here." Lu Lin seemed very relaxed on the surface, but Lin 11 knew it was far from as relaxed as he said. Otherwise, how could he have done so many things in just a moment and come back in less than a day? Lin 11 felt a little sorry for him. "You don't have to worry, you'll be fine with me in AU." Lu Lin smiled and said, "I believe you." He was just worried, and he missed them a little after being out for so long. "You go up and say hello to the children first and then go take a bath. The meal is already being prepared. You can come down and eat after washing." Lu Lin smiled and patted her head lovingly, "You are so virtuous." Lin 11 smiled sheepishly and said a little shyly, "I didn't prepare it." Lu Lin smiled and went upstairs without saying anything. By the time Lu Lin came downstairs after taking a shower, the dishes had already been prepared, and everyone was sitting on the sofa waiting for him. In fact, Lu Lin was a little surprised when he saw Tang Yu. He thought she would stay in the room for a night or more, but he didn't expect that she would come down just after dinner. But this was good, everyone could see her state. No need to make people panic. "Let's go eat," Lu Lin said with a smile. So the group of people got up and walked to the restaurant. Tang Yu didn't eat much at the dining table. He chewed just a little bit for a long time and seemed to have no appetite at all. Zhang Wanan, who has sharp eyes, has been observing Tang Yu. Seeing that Tang Yu didn't eat much, he asked with concern, "Is the food not delicious, Mom?" Tang Yu didn't hear it, but Lin 11 poked Tang Yu under the table in a panic. She was afraid that Zhang Wanan would find something. Tang Yu looked at Lin 11 confused, not knowing why she was poking him. Lin 11 behaved very naturally. She asked, "And asked you if the food is not delicious?" "Well, I think the food tonight is indeed not delicious." Tang Yu then realized what she was doing. She looked at Zhang Wanan, smiled and followed Lin 11's words, "It's a bit, but my mother is a little tired, so she has a bad appetite. After all, she hasn't gone shopping for so long." Zhang Wanan nodded thoughtfully, "Then go to bed early, Mom." Tang Yu nodded. She looked at the dishes on the table and thought, it's not that the food doesn't taste good, but that she really has no appetite. "I'll just update it today. It's been a rough day, and I have to go to class, so I'm really overwhelmed but not able to do it. Please understand, thank you." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 129. Chapter 129 Separation of Yin and Yang. Tang Yu went upstairs, and Lin 11 looked a little sad at her lonely back. She thought that if Tang Yu heard about Lao Zhang from her mouth instead of hearing it suddenly, he wouldn't feel so uncomfortable. She felt a little guilty. Lu Lin looked at Lin 11. He knew what she was thinking. She was blaming herself. "Eat," Lu Lin said softly, pulling Lin 11 back from his thoughts. "I want to go see him." Before dawn, Tang Yu couldn't hold back his temper and knocked on Lin 11's bedroom door. She didn't want to disturb them so early, but missing her made her uncomfortable. Lin 11 got up in a daze and opened the door. What he saw was a tortured woman who was in disgrace. She seemed to be even thinner than she was already. Her cheeks were sunken and her eyes were heavily dark circles. Lin 11 suddenly felt her nose was a little sore. She stretched out her hand to support Tang Yu and asked distressedly, "Aren't you sleeping?" Tang Yu smiled bitterly and shook his head. How could he sleep? "I want to go see him." This was the first thing she said when she knocked on the door. At this time, Lu Lin also got up and stood at the door. For a while, the three of them stood motionless at the door, looking at each other. "Let's go," Lu Lin said in a hoarse voice after a long time. The weather in Jincheng has turned cooler in September. When you wake up in the morning, the breeze blows so hard that you can't help but shiver. Lin 11 wrapped her coat tightly and got into the car. There was no other sound in the carriage except the sound of breathing. Laojiang Cemetery is in the suburbs. The scenery there is beautiful. Lao Zhang loved that kind of environment when he was alive. Lu Lin spent a lot of time looking for this place. They finally arrived at their destination after driving for about 3 hours. It was already dawn, but the clouds were thick and it seemed like it was going to rain. Lin 11 carefully took a few umbrellas from the car in case of emergency. "Walking up a road, you will get there in 10 minutes. Tang Yu was silent along the way. Lin 11 would glance at her from the corner of his eye from time to time, fearing that she would do something out of control. Tang Yu smiled after not knowing how many glances he had. "I won't do anything." Lin 11, who was caught, scratched his head and felt a little embarrassed. Lu Lin on the other side shook his head to Lin 11, indicating not to worry. Tang Yu's emotional change began when she stood in front of Lao Jiang's tomb. She placed dewy flowers in front of the tomb, and brought some of Lao Jiang's favorite foods and placed them there. After finishing the arrangement, Tang Yu suddenly didn't know why, as if all his strength had been drained away, he knelt down and sat upright in front of Lao Jiang's tomb. Then tears fell down in big drops, landing on the black marble altar. Lu Lin and Lin 11 felt quite uncomfortable when they saw this scene, especially Lin 11 felt a throbbing pain in her heart, as if her heart was being held and she couldn't breathe. Lu Lin supported Lin 11 and stood under a tree from a distance, looking over here. Tang Yu knelt down in front of the tomb and stretched out her hand tremblingly to touch the yellowed face. It was the face she missed day and night, but it looked like this when she saw him again. "You said you would come back alive and see Anan, but why did you abandon the two of us? How could you not keep your word? Are you so cruel to abandon us?" Tang Yu knelt down in front of the tomb and asked over and over again, "Horse." But the only answer to her was the crows circling in the sky. The people who promised to come back together are now separated from each other. Why do you want to protect me? Why, don't you take me with you? How can you bear to leave us? Tang Yu was still thinking over and over again. In the end, he seemed to have nothing to say, and only said why the words were spoken back and forth. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 130. Chapter 130. The dead are gone, so are the living. The mountain rain is about to come, the wind is filling the buildings, and the dark clouds are pressing down on the city to destroy it. For a time, the sky was covered with dark clouds, and the wind started blowing on the mountain. Her long coat rustled, and suddenly it began to rain lightly. Tang Yu's hair was messy, and she looked up blankly and smiled miserably. "It's raining. Don't you like rainy days the most? Don't you like to hear the sound of rain?" she said. Lin 11, who had been standing there watching from a distance, could also feel the raindrops. She opened an umbrella for Lu Lin, opened another one and carried it herself towards Tang Yu. Lin 11 walked over and gathered Tang Yu's clothes and whispered, "Don't catch a cold." Tang Yu raised his head and glanced at her. At this moment, she seemed to have seen some life-saving straw. She reached out and hugged Lin 11 tightly. At this moment, she was no longer shedding silent tears, but collapsed and cried, crying like a child. "What should I do? What should I do? I promised that when Anan grows up and no longer needs us, we will travel around the world together. We agreed to grow old together, and we agreed to watch the sunrise and sunset together. He is a liar." Lin 11 felt heartbroken and uncomfortable. She patted Tang Yu on the back and said, "It will be fine," but after she said that, she also shed tears silently. The dead are gone, the living are like this. When going down the mountain, Tang Yu was very weak from crying for a long time, and it was raining and the road was difficult to walk. Fortunately, an old man who came to commemorate his deceased family members used his car to carry the three of them down. "Girl, if you just drive a little, everything will be fine. You're still young," the uncle sighed when he got off the car. Lu Lin thanked the uncle, and then the three men left. After getting in the car, Tang Yu fell asleep because of his weakness and sleepiness. Lin 11 looked at her waxy face and couldn't help but reach out and touch her. She felt that she should take good care of her, otherwise she would not let her go if something happened, just like she blamed herself for not telling her the truth earlier. Tang Yu. The way home was not that smooth. There were a lot of traffic jams on the road. It was already 10 noon when we stopped all the way back. Today is Saturday. They left in a hurry and forgot to tell the two children. They just said something to the ant in a hurry. I guess the ant will tell the two children. As soon as she entered the door, she found Jongwanan curled up in Luz's arms on the sofa in a daze. Hearing the sound of the door closing, Jongwanan sat up in excitement, and then knocked the book out of Luz's hand. Luzhu was obviously a little surprised by her performance. He picked up the book and touched Jongwanan's head and said, "You're back, aren't you? Don't worry." Jongwanan nodded and ran towards the door without wearing any shoes. "Mom, Dad, where have you been?" Jongwanan asked Lin 11 and Tang Yu's hands. "I went out for a while to do something. You were still sleeping when I left, so I didn't disturb you," Lin 11 explained with a smile. Jongwanan looked between the three of them in confusion. "How?" "Put on your shoes," Luzhu interrupted what she was about to say and walked over with one hand in his pocket and the other holding slippers. Jongwanan smiled sheepishly and put her white and tender feet into the slippers. "There is still food in the kitchen, do you want Auntie to heat it up?" Luzhu asked. Lin 11 glanced at Tang Yu and nodded, "Let Auntie cook a pot of porridge." Luzhu nodded without saying anything. It was obvious that he had discovered something. The atmosphere became weird and terrifying after they came back. No one spoke in the entire living room. Even Jongwanan, who was usually talkative, fell silent at this moment. She lay obediently on Luzhu's lap and stared blankly at Tang Yu, who had his eyes closed tightly, not knowing what was going on. Restored today, 2 chapters. End of this chapter.